I spent one night in a famous haunted house. It was called the Blackwood Manor. The house was very old. It stood on a dark hill. Trees with no leaves stood around it like bones. The wind made a sad sound through the branches. I was there to do something strange. I was going to watch horror movies. All night. Alone. Or so I thought. The front door was huge, dark wood. It opened with a loud groan. The air inside smelled of dust and something else, something like old flowers and cold dirt. My heart was beating fast. Thump, thump, thump. The main hall was big and empty. A single dim light bulb hung from the high ceiling. It cast long, dancing shadows that looked like thin men reaching for me. Cobwebs hung in every corner. They looked like gray hair on an old woman. I could hear my own breathing. It was loud in the quiet house. I told myself it was just a house, just wood, just stone, just glass, but part of me did not believe that. The house felt like it was watching me, waiting. I walked slowly into the first room. I sat down in the cold armchair. My hands were shaking a little. I pressed the play button on the remote control. The small television screen flickered to life. The movie was an old one, a black and white classic about a vampire. I saw the vampire's castle on the screen. It looked a lot like the house I was in. Dark stone walls, big, empty rooms, long shadows. The movie was meant to scare me, but the real fear was all around me. The sounds from the movie mixed with the sounds of the house. I could not always tell which was which. A scream from the television was followed by a soft thump from the room above me. My eyes kept darting away from the screen. The shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking. My skin felt tight. My senses were on high alert. The vampire on the screen opened a coffin. At the same moment, I heard a lid slide somewhere in the house. The actors were just people in costumes, but my brain was playing tricks on me. The fear from the movie was leaking out into the room. It was mixing with the fear I already felt. It was a double fear. I was scared of the man on the screen, and I was scared of the man who was not on the screen. The man I could not see but felt was there. I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The cold was getting worse. It was a wet cold that seemed to sink into my bones. I started to breathe slowly, in and out, in and out. It was a trick I learned to control my fear. I needed to stay calm. I had to get through the night, but the house did not want me to be calm. As I took a slow breath, a book fell from a shelf behind me. It hit the floor with a loud thud. I spun around. There was no one there, just the book, its pages flipping softly as if the house itself was turning them. My first movie was over. The television screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy and deep. I had to move to the next room. The next room was the dining room down the long, dark hall. I stood up on shaky legs. I took my small flashlight. Its beam cut a weak circle in the darkness ahead. The shadows in the hall danced away from the light. The floorboards creaked, groaned, creaked. It sounded like I was waking something up. I felt eyes on my back. I stopped and turned around quickly. I swept the flashlight back down the hall. For just a second, I saw it. A tall, thin shadow at the far end of the hall. Darker than the other shadows. The shape of a man. It stood perfectly still. Then, as my light touched it, it was gone. My blood ran cold. Was that an actor? Part of the show? Or was it something else? The organizers had told me there would be performers in the house. They would interact with me. The shadow did not interact. I forced myself to keep walking, faster now, toward the light of the next television. Another door. This one felt different, heavier. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the cold brass knob. I could almost feel a stillness on the other side, a waiting silence that was more profound than anything I had experienced in the house so far. Taking a shallow breath, I finally turned the knob. I pushed the dining room door open. It swung inward with a low, protracted moan, a sound of wood complaining after decades of disuse. The air that spilled out was thick and stagnant, carrying a history I was about to step into. This room was even bigger than the library, a cavern of shadows that swallowed the light from the hallway. It felt impossibly vast, the ceiling lost in the gloom above. A long wooden table, dark and monolithic, stretched from one end to the other, flanked by a silent procession of high-backed chairs. It was a banquet table fit for royalty, or perhaps for a very large, very quiet family. It was set for a dinner party that never happened, or perhaps one that was eternally happening. Plates thick with a gray, velvet layer of dust. Silverware once polished and proud, now black with the irreversible tarnish of time. An overturned wine glass lay on its side, a silent testament to a final, forgotten toast. A tarnished silver candelabra stood in the center, its candles unlit, their wicks stiff with age. And there, at the far end of this ghostly banquet, another television was waiting for me. Its small screen glowed with a faint expectant light, a bizarre technological intrusion in this mausoleum of the past. I walked the length of the table and sat down. This movie was about a haunted house, very fitting. It was becoming clear this wasn't a random selection of tapes. Each one felt chosen, curated for me, a lesson or a warning. As my eyes adjusted, I became aware of the smell in this room. It was different. It wasn't just the dry, papery scent of dust and decay I'd grown used to. Underneath it all, there was a faint, cloying sweetness. Like rotting flowers, their perfume turned sour and sickly. And something else, too. A sharp, coppery, and metallic tang that caught in the back of my throat, like old pennies. Or old blood. I tried not to breathe it in too deeply, pulling the collar of my shirt up over my nose. The smell made my stomach turn. A primal revulsion to the scent of life gone wrong. I reached out and ran my finger through the dust on a plate. It felt gritty and ancient, a sediment of lost years. I could almost feel the vibrations of the past trapped beneath it. I imagined people sitting here, laughing, talking, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation. Now it was just a tomb, preserving a single, silent moment for eternity. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. I sat in front of the TV and pressed play. The movie began, its tinny sound a sacrilege in the hallowed quiet. A family moved into a new house, a house with a dark past. The parallels were so on the nose it was almost comical, if I had any humor left in me. On the screen, a little girl spoke to an imaginary friend she'd found in the house, and as she delivered her line, I heard a soft scraping sound from the far end of the table. My own table. It was the sound of a chair being pulled out, a slow, deliberate drag across the wooden floor. I stared into the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wasn't alone at the table. I knew what I heard. Someone, or something, had just joined me for dinner. Section 5. A voice from the kitchen. The whispering stopped. Just cut off. As if a switch had been flipped. The sudden absence of the sound was somehow worse than the sound itself. It left a ringing in my ears, a void that felt heavy, watchful. I sat there in the oppressive darkness for what felt like an eternity. Just listening. My own breathing was a thunder in my chest, my heartbeat a frantic drum against my ribs. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the coiled, silent stillness of a predator waiting to strike. Too quiet. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, to become one with the shadows, but I knew I had to keep moving. The next room on my list was the kitchen, accessible only through a grimy, swinging door at the end of the hall. It loomed in the narrow beam of my light, a gateway to another unknown. With a deep, shaky breath, I pushed it. The hinges protested with a low groan, and the door swung back and forth, squeak, squeak, squeak. Each swing was a tick of a clock, counting down to something awful. The kitchen was a preserved nightmare, a scene frozen in decay, ripped from another time. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a tableau of neglect. A huge black stove, its iron body covered in rust and cold to the touch, stood like a tombstone. Pots and pans were scattered around it, their surfaces coated in a thick, sticky layer of ancient grease and draped in intricate webs. The air was thick, a palpable miasma that caught in the back of my throat. The cloying smell of spoiled food, of rot and mildew, mingled with something else. A sharp, sour tang. Like old milk left out for decades, and there, on a stained butcher's block in the center of the room, sat the TV. Its screen was dark, but I knew what was waiting. The movie was about a killer with a knife. Of course it was. It always was. I felt compelled to press play. The familiar grating, scary music erupted from the tiny speaker, filling the grimy room with manufactured dread. The screen flickered to life, with frantic jarring close-ups of knives, chopping, slicing. The flickering light from the screen drew my eyes to the wall behind it. A magnetic strip held a set of butcher knives. My flashlight beam traced their outlines, dull and rusty, spotted with age, but their edges still looked sharp enough to do the job. That's when I heard it. Over the movie's soundtrack, a soft rhythmic sound started up from somewhere behind me. Chop, chop, chop. It was methodical, unhurried. I spun around, my light cutting a wild arc through the darkness. The sound came from a dark corner where an old wooden chopping block sat on a countertop. It was the distinct sound of a blade hitting wood, like someone calmly preparing vegetables. But no one was there. The corner was empty. The steady, calm, domestic nature of that sound was the most terrifying thing I had experienced all night. It was so mundane, so out of place, that it felt utterly insane. I wanted to run, to bolt from the room, but my feet felt glued to the grimy linoleum. I was paralyzed. Suddenly, the chopping stopped. The silence crashed back in, absolute and deafening for a single heart-stopping second, and then a voice whispered, a dry, sibilant breath right next to my ear. Hungry? The silence of the house was a living thing, pressing in from all sides. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet felt like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. I was beginning to feel the isolation, the sense that the house itself was watching me, waiting. I yelled and jumped away, a raw, involuntary sound torn from my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs as I spun my light through the suffocating dark. The beam cut a frantic path across peeling linoleum, rusted appliances and cabinets, thick with dust. The kitchen was empty, utterly still, but I had felt it, the warm, moist breath on my neck, a phantom touch that lingered on my skin, raising goosebumps. It was not a hidden speaker, not some cheap parlor trick. The intimacy of it, the sheer biological reality of it, was undeniable. It was a person, an actor. The realization was somehow more terrifying than any ghost. They had gotten so close, close enough for me to feel their life force. And I hadn't heard a single sound, not a footstep, not a rustle of clothing, nothing. The skill, the predatory silence of it, was deeply unsettling. I ran out of the kitchen. I didn't think, I just moved, a primal urge to put distance between myself and that silent performer. I did not look back. Leaning against the wall in the hallway, I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. My breathing was ragged, shallow. I had to get a grip. This is what they wanted. To fray my nerves, to make me jump at shadows. It's a show, it's just a show. I repeated the words like a prayer, a desperate mantra against the encroaching fear. After a few minutes, my heart slowed its frantic pace. I was shaken, but not broken. I had to finish this. I had to see it through to the end. Upstairs, the air grew colder. A long hall stretched before me, lined with old portraits. Their painted eyes, veiled by decades of dust, seemed to follow my progress. Faces from another time, their expressions captured in oil and canvas. Sad, angry, accusatory. Each one felt like a silent judge in this forgotten place. At the end of the hall, I found the bathroom. A claw-foot tub stood like a porcelain sarcophagus in the center of the room, and on the wall, a big, ornate mirror, its silvering corrupted by black spots, the gilded frame grimy and flaking. It was a dark portal on the wall. The television sat on a small stool, its screen casting the only other light in the room besides my flashlight. The movie was about a ghost that appears in mirrors. I almost laughed. A dry, humorless sound. They were leaning into the themes, laying the groundwork, baiting the trap with classic horror tropes. I tried not to look at the mirror. I focused on the tub, the tiles, anything else. But it was a magnet. I couldn't resist. I slowly lifted my eyes to the grimy glass and saw myself, a stranger, pale and wide-eyed, exhaustion etched into every line of my face, alone, so utterly alone. Then behind me in the reflection, a figure resolved out of the darkness. A tall woman in old severe clothing stood in the doorway. Her face was a mask of white, her eyes just dark pits of shadow. She was there, clear as day in the corrupted silver. She raised a hand, slow and deliberate, and her lips peeled back into a smile that held no warmth, only malice. I whipped around, my light slashing the space where she stood. The doorway was empty, the air was still. She was gone, but her smile was burned into my mind. My nerve almost broke. It had to be the actress. In the mirror, then gone in reality. A classic trick. In this house, it was devastating. There was only one location left. The final room, a small, private theater in the attic. The stairs were narrow and steep. The air grew colder, smelling of cedar and decay. Under the slanted beams, a projection screen hung from a beam. A single plush red chair waited, inviting and sinister. I walked to it and sat. The projector hummed a life. A new movie. A family trapped in their home, tormented by figures at their windows. The film built slowly, faces at windows, shadows passing. My hands gripped the armrest. I listened to the attic around me. I was waiting. I knew something was going to happen. The music swelled. On screen, someone hid under a bed. The camera panned toward the window. I held my breath. I knew a scare was coming, on the screen, and in the room with me. The moment in the movie arrived, a terrifying face appeared in the window on screen. The music screamed, the characters screamed. At that split second, a loud bang behind me, like a window smashed. I leaped out of the red chair. I spun around, a single round window high on the attic wall. Dark, nothing there. The movie still played. The bang had to be a hidden speaker, timed perfectly, brilliant, cruel. Then I saw it, a movement in the window, not a reflection, something outside. A face faded into view, pale, gaunt, large dark eyes, a wide, unnatural smile. The face from the movie, but not on the screen. It stared in at me, an actor in a mask. They must have climbed, but there was no balcony, no ledge, just a sheer drop. The face did not move. Its smile widened. I could not move. The movie ended. The screen went black. I do not know how long I stood there in the dark. Eventually the lights flickered on. The show was over.
A man in a black t-shirt came up the stairs, one of the organizers. "How was it?" he asked.
I pointed at the round window. "The face," I whispered. He looked. His smile faded. "There's no one out there. No way to get to that window from the outside." We left the attic. We walked down through the silent, empty house. The performers were gone. The house was just a house again. I was shaken. My nerves were frayed. But in the cold morning air, I felt proud. I had made it through the night. Fear is not just about what you see, it's what you don't. What about you? What is the scariest thing that has ever happened to you?